Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Cram. I am thrilled to be speaking today with author Molly Fennig. She is going to be sharing a little bit about her book, Starvation, and much more. Get your stuff together.
Yeah. No, I think that's super common. And I think that's part of why mental health literature is so important, because for people on the outside, it's like, oh my gosh, this is not that big of a deal. Like, just get over yourself, just whatever.
Molly Fennig studied neuroscience, Spanish, and English at Swarthmore College. She has published in the Blue Route Literary Magazine, the Blue Nib, the Running Wild Press Anthology, Havoc 2020 Anthology, and other literary presses, and multiple scientific journals. Molly currently works at the University of Minnesota in eating disorders treatment research and hopes to get her doctorate in clinical psychology. Outside of her passion for writing and mental health, Molly enjoys eating large quantities of chocolate and spending time with her dog, Peaches. Peach. Tell me a little bit about maybe the plot or a little bit about the book.
Yeah, so the book follows protagonist Wes. He's a high school wrestler, and it really follows his journey through an eating disorder, and there's some mystery, some suspense in there. I really tried to make sure that it was something that was quick and easy to read. Boys are less likely to read and continue to read, and I think that is unfortunate. So being able to write a male protagonist on this issue that I think isn't talked enough about for men, and entice young male readers to keep reading is really a goal of mine. Covers eating disorders, some suicidal ideation, sports.
There is a lot. There is a lot. I mean, there's something that I find wonderful, especially, would you classify this book as, because I do, young adult fiction, right? Yeah. And what I find when I read young adult fiction, which is one of my favorite genres to read, is the willingness of authors like yourself to tackle not just one topic, but like suicide, there's a lot. In addition to, like, there's a bit of a coming of age in here. There's a romantic, there's a lot going on in a really, really wonderful way. Do you find that as well in young adult fiction, that they're more willing to? Maybe I'm just not as well read. I don't know. What do you think about that?
My bias is that I read mostly young adult, because I do think that it does a great job of tackling subjects and being really easy to read. I think a lot of times adults, when they're reading, they want kind of an escape. So you don't necessarily want to tackle these difficult subjects. They're like, I deal with that enough in my day-to-day life. Versus
True.
Teens are really trying to learn about the world, and I think really are tackling these issues day to day. So it feels very pertinent to them. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of the difference. Also, maybe just that's how it is, and that's how it's continuing.
Yeah, that's how it is. And I agree. Can you tell me a little bit about, like, the experience of being a Minnesota author? And how that, you take it away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I actually got into kind of published writing from my high school English teacher. So I had written a book and kind of was talking to her one day, like, I don't know if this is something I could publish. And she put me in touch with other people. And I think really the Minnesota community is very, like, literary. So there are a lot of connections, and the Loft Literary Center and a bunch of bookstores. I think it's really a place that really fosters a lot of reading and writing and publishing, which I think is great. And I know that a lot of people that I've met, do a lot of reading versus friends that I've met from other states maybe aren't as much into reading. I don't know if that's just because it's cold and we don't have anything else to do.
I think you might be onto something there, because I adore reading. And had we grown up I don't know. In California, would we be as, I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I have a lot of questions, but I do want to touch on some of the ones here. You know, I think being a Minnesota author and publishing a novel, what are some of the, what are some of the intricacies, or what's involved in that process? I mean, you've already mentioned the Loft Literary Center, and you've mentioned, that Minnesota is very supportive. How does that play into like the bigger picture of getting, something actual published?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends which route you go. I don't know how much people who are listening know, but there's self-publishing where you're basically paying for everything. And then you have all the control, or more traditional publishing where publishers said that basically they believe enough in your work that they're going to pay for the cost.
Yes.
And so you relinquish some control, and some other things. And then there's kind of in the middle where either hybrid presses or just smaller presses where they'll pay for the publishing, but maybe you have to do more marketing or things like that. And I know my publisher is actually from Utah, which is kind of random, but
it's Immortal Works, right? Yeah. Immortal Works.
But I actually found them I was in a critique group through the Loft Literary Center. Nice. So they have postings on there. And I was critiquing a book, and I was probably 80% done. And I was asking the author for the next chapter, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just got published. I can't send you the last 20%. And it was such a good book. I was like, no, I'm dying for the end. I need the end. Who took your book? And she said Immortal Works. And she's like, you should send yours in. So I did. And so that's how I found my publisher. Eventually I got to read it. It was a great book. But basically through that critique group was how I found my publisher.
Well, that's amazing. Well, one, that's amazing. Two, can you tell me the title of the book that you were so curious to read the end of? Yeah,
it's Unfit by Karma Chestnut. So it's kind of a dystopian, sci-fi, and I don't normally like sci-fi. I've read more than enough dystopian for a lifetime, but this one was super good. So if you're looking for recommendations.
I'm always looking for a good recommendation. I mean, I'm sure like most people I have books everywhere and stacks of them. So, but a good recommendation that's always looking for those. So you obviously are working with Immortal Works. Tell me a little bit about as I was reading this, I'm going to be really blunt and really honest. I started reading it. I was like, where is, because I knew that, Molly Fennig, and I was like, okay. And she's writing from a male perspective, which I actually really love it when authors are writing either kind of, when men write women or women write men, but I only love it when it's done well. So I was reading and I was like, it's Colin and forgive me if I'm pronouncing, is it Kayla?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Kayla. Yeah. Colin and Kayla. So I was reading and I was like, wait a minute. And then I was like, no. And then I was like, no, Molly. Yeah. I think you did a really good job of writing from the male perspective. So I'm curious, especially from I'm an actor, I'm an artist. And I think that, some of the weaving that you did with having Colin be artistic and have some of those skill sets made a lot of sense to my brain when I was reading it. Why did you choose to write it from that perspective? And did you do anything special to do so?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely scary at first. I'm like, this is not something I can pull from past experience in a way. But I really wanted to tell the story of male eating disorders. And to do so, you have to write about men with eating disorders, and really wanting it to be personal and wanting the reader to connect with them. I knew I had to write first person. So I think part of why it worked was that I wasn't super intentionally trying to write from the male perspective, but just trying to write just a person. And I think, like when we talk about female characters that fall flat, it's just like, they aren't full people. And so I think just focusing on that takes you like 90% of the way.
Yes. I've read so many books where, it's like, do you know any women like personally in your life? So flipping that way.
Yeah. But it was definitely a worry of mine, like, wanting to make sure I'm capturing that accurately, and also making sure I'm capturing eating disorder as well. And I've gotten really good feedback that people think it is representative, which is like the best news ever. Not wanting to glorify or vilify or anything like that.
Yeah, I thought that there was a nice balance to it. And I, just my experience while I was reading it, there was, again, not necessarily knowing where it was going and stuff like that. I kept flipping to the back, and then, because I was reading it and I was like, why is this so well written? Like, and it read well. And then I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. And then I do like, obviously you work with eating disorders and things like that. So, you're writing about stuff that you have an intimate knowledge of, and it shows in the work, because I was like, some of this, like this almost, there must be pieces explained to me, like, cause it's fiction, but it feels to me like there's more to it. And am I wrong in that? Like, it doesn't seem like everything is completely made up.
No. Yeah. Most of it I tried, especially the eating disorder part, tried to make sure that these are really things that happen and things that people do. Like on the cover, you'll see that he's like gripping his wrist. So that's what we call body checking behavior.
Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of times. So it can be checking yourself in the mirror. It can be measuring yourself, pinching certain parts. And it's basically a way to relieve anxiety, to kind of make people feel like, oh, I haven't actually gained weight.
Is it a, I'm fascinated in some ways. So like grabbing, like in the picture, this is good to do?
So from a clinical perspective, not really, because it reinforces itself. So you feel anxious, then you have to check, and then you feel more anxious.
Interesting.
It reinforces, okay. But
I understand.
A lot of people with eating disorders do it, and like body checking to make sure that. Also, it's problematic if you feel like you need to make sure that you haven't gained weight. But that's something that people tend to do. So that's something I wanted to add in. I think a lot of times. My special interest is the overlap of eating disorders and anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety in eating disorders, and I personally have struggled with anxiety, and so I think that's where it felt like the best to approach it, because then I could take from my own experiences, and also I think everyone's experienced anxiety, fear in some manner. So it's something that people can really relate to in a way that not eating maybe isn't.
Absolutely. That and that shines through really well for anybody that wants to pick it up and read it. There's I appreciated the way in which you used like you do one chapter before and then you do a chapter after, and it made it really interesting, and it was something that I think people could take some notes on. And I mean that even from the perspective of like some of the films that I've even worked on and acted in and stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, kind of taking the chapters and jumbling them, and that, not jumbling, but like rearranging them. It makes it a bit more fun. Even though it's really dark, some of it is really dark, Molly. Like some of it, I was like, okay, yeah.
But I think I started doing that as like a way to add tension, right? Like, okay, we're before and after what's happening. Because I want the book to be more than just about the eating disorder. But I think also thematically, looking back, it kind of nicely shows like his recovery in the way of like a lot of times recovery isn't linear. And so your before looks a lot like your after, but your after, you're actually progressing, even if you have those ups and downs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's within that, like something I was really curious about and fascinated by was the love interest between Colin and Kayla, and how interesting it was because of the before and after, and seeing that tension play out between the two, and seeing there's something that I really, really like that you kind of touch on in the before, where it almost was I mean, it speaks to me even, and I'm not in junior high, but it speaks to me in that way where I think he might have even mentioned something like, I don't know if he mentioned it, but it was very obvious from the book. He gave too much. He did too much for her. At least that was my takeaway, where I was like,
yeah,
you're letting someone there's too much. And yeah, I don't know if you have a comment on that, but it's just something that I took away.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that I sometimes have issues with mental health books, is like you find romance and then everything is better and they're going to like fix you. And really wanting to reinforce this idea that like that can be really unhealthy and really draw you into your own mental issues, but also like some codependency, or really that he needs to figure out his own stuff before he can really be in a place to have a healthy relationship, which isn't to say he doesn't deserve love or relationships, but just being careful to jump from one extreme of being lonely and alone to like codependency.
Anything for love, right? No matter how. No. So tell me a little bit about the athlete aspect, like from your experience, and then maybe if we can touch on like, how did you know all this about wrestling?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that looking back, I was like, oh, that happened. In the moment, it was, we had wrestlers who would do all kinds of problematic things that I don't have to describe what they are, because but doing a lot of problematic things. And then there were some who were very adamant that they weren't going to do that. And I remember being like, oh, that's, as a volleyball player, we don't cut weight. Like that's not even something we have to decide whether we're going to do that or not. So I think looking back, I was like, oh, wow, that was super problematic. And I knew about it, but I didn't really know like how problematic that was. And I think having people that I knew who were really adamant about like, I'm not going to do that, was a way of, that's when I first found out about it. I think for volleyball, we're not cutting weight. I did have multiple coaches who would make us, do food logs, which I think were well-intentioned, but for some people, especially
that's just for anybody that, because I might just be the only one. A food log is where you write down every single thing you eat.
Yep, exactly.
And okay, and so that when you're yeah.
So I think it's well intentioned. Making sure that people are eating enough protein and getting a variety of foods. But for people with disordered eating tendencies, it's really hard and can be triggering to write down everything you're eating. And people would lie on them for one way or the other. Especially in college, this came up. We had a number of people who had histories of eating disorders, and we're really pushing back on us doing that. I think that was one of the main ways it manifested itself. But I know for other sports, gymnastics and things like that, where there is a lot more emphasis on figure and shape, that there are other issues too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, and it manifests itself in, I keep relating it to the industries that I'm working in, currently, but like in the, in a parallel to the acting world, like the modeling world there, obviously there's huge issues with that. And what I like about going at it from a male perspective too, is like, I guess I can't speak to 100% to like the straight heterosexual male, but I know that in the gay community, like eating disorders, it is a thing that isn't really talked about a ton, but it is prevalent and it exists. And I should mention too, I brought this to my book club with all the guys, and I was like, guys, take a peek. And a lot of them were like, yeah, I'll take a look at that. So,
awesome.
Yeah, it's becoming even more clear as if the book wasn't kind of mapping that out, but it's becoming very clear, kind of like some of the thought and trajectory of how you got to where you were with writing this. Mm-hmm. I remember even my dad when he was a wrestler, he talked about cutting weight, and fortunately, fortunately, he eats and eats and eats and eats and eats. And I have that gene where, there's, it's, I don't know. I want to be cautious as well. And because I want to be empathetic, because I know like what one person struggles with, somebody else may not. So I hope that in anything that I'm saying here, I hope people understand the intention too. I'm not trying to take that on. Yeah. Which is something too I appreciated about the book was your empathy towards the characters. Like there was moments in it where, me as a person, I was like, why is this so hard? Like meaning I think more towards like maybe like an adult with an angst with like the junior high person. I'm like, get your stuff together. Like
No, I think that's super common. And I think that's part of why mental health literature is so important, because for people on the outside, it's like, oh my gosh, this is not that big of a deal. Like, just get over yourself, just whatever. And until you can really get at that point where you're understanding the cognitions and the emotions and what it feels like, you aren't going to be able to have that empathy. And then you get reactions where it might be well-intentioned, but it's really not helpful and even like frustratingly off.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm replaying all of the times in life where I have not done exactly what you're talking about, where it's like, nope, I'm going to, yeah.
And with that, I think one thing that often comes up is people wanting to know like how to talk about mental health and maybe if they're concerned about somebody or just to open the conversation. And I think leading with empathy is great, and really leading with feelings. So, I feel this way. I feel afraid because I see these things happening, like what's going on. And then coming at it rather than like a problem solving mode, like, okay, let's fix you. Like, no, let's just sit here and hold those big emotions. Like you're feeling scared, you're feeling upset. Like, let's just sit there with those emotions. They aren't something we need to fix. I think that's a huge thing.
It's huge. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I'm pointing at me because I'm so often, and I'm sure most people do this too, because it's that knee jerk, like, let me fix it. Let me make it better. And it's like, well, a lot of times I can't. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I really think Colin's mom is the character in this book that really, and his dad too, but I saw that the most in her struggle of trying to be a caregiver, and also how do you that there's a bit of a challenge there. So I don't know. I liked her.
I wanted her to be kind of like the well-intentioned mom that doesn't quite know how to help. Like she's trying her best and isn't quite there yet. Because I think a lot of us are the mom, trying her best and not quite there yet.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would like me to know, or even listeners to know, or
Yeah, I think for listeners, if you're an author, I should do book reviews. So definitely reach out. If you're looking to buy the book, you can get it on my website or on Amazon.
What is your website, by the way?
It's just my name, mollyfennig.com.
Perfect. mollyfennig.com.
Yep. And then if for readers, I try to post a lot of book reviews. I read a lot of mental health fiction because that's kind of in my wheelhouse. So I try to review a lot of those. So yeah, definitely love to give back. So anybody who has questions or thoughts, love to hear them. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's so awesome. I'm going to spring this on you. Are you game to do a little lightning round of 3 questions they're just random questions. Just so people can kind of get to know maybe a little bit more about you. For one, if you, Molly, were home on a rainy Sunday afternoon, what movie would you most want to see on television?
So my dog Peach, she's asleep, by the way. She was here earlier. She and I like to watch a lot of like rom-coms and reality TV, especially if there are dogs in it. So we would probably watch some kind of rom-com with dogs, but not the sad kind.
Good clarifier, because there's so many of those.
But I don't like to rewatch movies, so I would watch something new. So I don't have one in mind.
I'm like you in that regard. What about books? Do you reread books? I have a hard time with that.
Only I know it's a good book if I've reread it. Yeah. So there are a couple books that I will reread, but otherwise, pretty much no.
Otherwise, like, yeah, similar. Okay, question number 2. You've been given an elephant. You can't get rid of it. What would you do with it?
Does giving it to charity count as giving it away or selling it?
Sure.
Okay, I would probably. I think there are a lot of awesome like charities like Heifer International that give animals to lower income countries or and do awesome things with that. So I would probably give it to them because I don't really have a use for an elephant.
And question number 3. What's in your fridge right now?
Oh boy. I just made banana bread. I don't know that you refrigerate that, but there's some banana bread out. And I have some salad and a lot of like microwavable meals. I can cook. I don't like to. I'd rather spend that time reading or doing other things.
I love that. I love banana bread, by the way, too. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm also gluten-free, so baking is great because then I can make things gluten-free. And
that opens up an interesting can of worms with cooking.
Baking is one of the few things that I started off really bad at and still loved. Everything else, I usually liked it because I was good at it.
I love that so much because of the. So you've gotten better, yeah.
Yeah. Better. Yep.
I'm only chuckling because I have an older sister and she bakes really well, and I kid you not, like she and I stood side by side in the Christmas season, and she was making cookies, and I was like, okay, I'll make a batch right next to you. I literally did everything that she did. Like hers came out these beautiful, beautiful cookies. My niece came out and she's like, what happened? Like they were misshapen and gross, and no idea. So I'm not necessarily considering myself a good baker. But it sounds like if you made banana bread, I'm guessing you're probably light years ahead of myself.
Years of practice.
Thanks so much for joining me, Molly. For listeners, to find out more about Molly, log on to her website at mollyfennig.com. You also can find Starvation at Immortal Works, which is immortalworks.press. And I also wanted to share as well, I really appreciated that Molly included these in the author's note. The National Eating Disorders Association helpline is 800-931-2237. Go to nationaleatingdisorders.org. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline, which is 1-800-273-8255. Go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. For mental health information, support groups, and more, visit nami.org. And to find a mental health provider in your area covered by your insurance, go to psychologytoday.com/US/therapists. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned for more, and you can always find me at IamPaulCram.com.